Sue Moroney.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in support of this bill by my colleague, put forward by my colleague, the Honourable Damien O'Connor. If only what the last speaker said was true. If only events actually had made this an irrelevant debate for this parliament, I'd be fine with that. I'd be ecstatic about that, because that would mean that workers in workplaces, particularly the most dangerous workplace of New Zealand mines, would be safe. But sadly, Mr Speaker, that is not the case, and that is why we are debating this very important bill, because that government opposite has not seen fit to make this a priority as it should be. Mr Speaker, I recall speaking on, I think it must have been one of the readings of the bill that the government has passed with regard to mine safety, and I remember imploring this government to never forget what we have learnt from Pike River Mine and the tragedy that unfolded there. I remember also saying to them, please don't do what I think this parliament is guilty of doing in forgetting the Cave Creek tragedy and all the lessons that we learnt from that particular series of tragic events. It appears to me that the national government is going to go down that same path again. They forgot about what they learnt about the tragedies of not having strong enough regulations when it came to Cave Creek, and they're about to do it again with regard to what the Royal Commission has told us about the outcomes of the Pike River Mine tragedy, and it's not even that very long ago. And as many speakers in this debate have said, on the West Coast, where my good colleague is the MP and represents that area particularly well, it is just as though it happened yesterday. That tragic event is just as though it just happened yesterday for the people of the West Coast. And here's the government already forgetting the lessons. And we know that they're forgetting the lessons because they are holding up the Health and Safety Reform Bill in Select Committee. And it's really clear that that is what is occurring. There's disagreement in the ranks of the National Party. They can't seem to get their act together around this. They are falling apart around this issue. Meanwhile, the people of the West Coast wait. Meanwhile, the people in workplaces all up and down the land wait for the National Party to try and get its act together so that we can ensure that workers, when they go to work, return safely. And I want to agree with the person who spoke from New Zealand First, because actually this does surpass what one gets paid at work, because there's no point getting a great wage at work if you can't actually perform the function safely. If you're not going to make it home to your family, there's no point in what the size of the paycheck is. This issue of health and safety should be paramount, and it should be at the forefront of that government's thinking. It should be a priority for them. But what are they doing? Instead, they're voting against this legislation, and they also watered down the legislation that came from the Royal Commission, where they said it should have also covered quarry workers. They watered that down, and we saw the sorry consequences of that just a few weeks ago. And they are doing the same thing with the Health and Safety Reform Bill. They are attempting to water that piece of legislation down. Well, I'd know because I'm on the Select Committee, actually, Mr Bishop. That's how I'd know. And that government is attempting to actually water down. And he'll know this because he's in the National Party caucus, where they've been debating how they're going to water down the recommendations from the Royal Commission. That's right, Mr Speaker. The recommendations of the Royal Commission have become an item for debate in the National Party caucus because they can't agree on whether they think workers' health and safety, particularly in the area, the dangerous workplace of mines, should be paramount or not. Mr Speaker, I just recently learned that my husband's great-grandfather, who was an MP for the Ohanamiriri area, did several good pieces of legislation to ensure that the miners in that community were made safe many, many decades ago. And to me, it's an absolute travesty that I'm standing here debating the same issues that are still not addressed, and thanks to that national government will continue not to be addressed.